Hello, welcome to the self learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we are going to start Unit 1 Significance of Western Political Thought. And we start topic Western Political Thought, Nature and Content. It is impossible to imagine political thought of the West, for that matter, of any society without history. Political thought is related to politics, but it is history that provides political thought its very basis. We do not mean to say that political thought can be studied without politics, but we certainly want to insist that we cannot study political thought without history. Understanding political thought in the historical context is, in fact, understanding political thought in the real sense. A political philosopher's political philosophy emerges in the age of philosopher breaths. In fact, his political philosophy is an answer to the times the philosopher lives in. His philosophy cannot be separated from history of his time. No political thinker builds up his political philosophy without taking an account of the age or his times. To put the point in another sense, it may be said that a political philosopher is understood only in his milieu. Plato, though an idealist, could hardly be separated from his soul. His classification of states depicted the classification as it prevailed then. His theory of education was drawn heavily from what existed in Athens and Sparta then. Machiavelli's whole methodology depicted his debt to history. The contractualist Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau made history as the basis of their social contract theory. Karl Marx went all the way to advocate the materialistic interpretation of history. The objective conditions of history always provide the foundations on which the political philosophers have built their philosophy. Furthermore, we can understand the political philosophy of a political thinker only in the historical context. Separate a political philosopher from his time, one will always find a proper condemning Plato as an enemy of his open society. A contextual study is always a safer method of understanding a text. A text without a context is a structure without a base. Machiavelli is better understood in the context of Renaissance. Hobbes and Locke, with their views as apart as the north-south poles, can be better studied in the background of English Civil War. Marx can be understood in the light of the growing capitalism of the European Western society. Western political thought is based on history, but its history, Professor Sabin rightly says, has no concluding chapter. It has grown and is growing, and in fact will always keep growing. It has grown in a typical way. Each subsequent philosopher condemns or criticizes the philosophy or political idea of an earlier philosopher, and in the process builds his new own philosophy. Aristotle did so with Plato, Locke did so with Filmer, Bentham with Blackstone, John Stuart Mill with Bentham, Marx did so with Hegel, Adam Smith, and Proudhon. So, Western philosophy, political thought has grown. It proceeds on polemic, it changes, but it continues. It is continuous since the days of Plato and Aristotle. No wonder if then it is said that all philosophy is a footnote to Plato. Plato and Aristotle together gave the base on which stands the whole fiber of Western political thought. For political idealism and political realism are the two pillars of the Western political philosophy, from where rise numerous other related shades. It is not easy to identify what the Western political thought contains. The attempt indeed would be arbitrary. However, major contents of the Western political thought can, for the sake of making a point, be stated to be political institutions and procedures, political idealism, and realism, and that we will study in our next section. The next section is Western political thought, political institutions, and political procedures. Western political thought deals highly with political institutions and procedures relating to them. If political theory deals with what is related to or is relevant to politics, political thought, coming as it is from the writing of a host of political philosophers, deals with political power, that is, wherein it is vested and how it is exercised, and for what object does it exist. The political thinker from the early days of the present time have dealt with such questions relating to politics. Plato was more interested in the state as it ought to be than Aristotle, who devoted all his energy on the best practicable state. The ancient Roman theorists talked about the nature and role of the law in administration. With the medieval church theorist Thomas Aquinas especially, political power was made to work under the divine law, the divine law under the natural law under the eternal law. The early modern political theorists, Machiavelli and Bodin, were concerned with the supreme power, that is, sovereignty of the state, or with actual and political states. The contractualists Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau were eager to answer questions as to how the state came into existence and as to why people obey laws, while political philosophy deals with institutions as they were, as they are, and as they need or ought to be. Marx saw them in materialistic terms. Sabin puts the point across when he says an important function of political thought, meaning the theorist or the political thought, is not only to show what a political practice, that is, politics, political activity of his time, is, but also to show what it means. In showing what a practice means or what it ought to mean, political theory can alter what it is. Political philosophers have sought to understand the political institutions of their time, have given them the meanings and in doing so, have suggested ways of altering them. Thus, we may say that political thought deals with institutions. Furthermore, and it is important as well, subsequent philosophers have, after having suggested the changes in the institutions, maintained continuity. The political philosopher, to use Sabine's words, is a connector or relator who waves the political fiber. Western political thought is equally dominated since the beginning with an interest in the political procedures as to how and why political power is applied. Indeed, political thought deals with political institutions, but it is also related to the working of political institutions. The political philosophers were and are primarily concerned not with what a state is or what it does, but also with how a state once entrusted with power makes use of it. In other words, political thought has been, along with the study of political institutions, dominated with, if we want to give it a word, the rule of law, that is, the procedure as to how the political power is put to use. The rule of law means that there has to be the law that rules the people and not the men that rules. It is a negation of the coercive, arbitrary, and totalitarianism rule. It is a justification of power and its use. Rule of law as a concept has certain features of its own. The law is to be applied impersonally. It cannot be used as a means for attaining individuals' ends. It must be applied indiscriminately, though it is an act of particular circumstances, has to be independent from the particularities. It forbids people to use coercive power over others. It has to respond to the general norms of society and equilibrium. It has to be in consonance to reason. Plato's ideal republic was a construction of reason, and one of the major concerns of republic was the development of leadership that would not be corrupt and would remain subservient to its rational law. Aristotle preferred the rule of law to the rule of man. Howsoever wise these may be, the Romans and the medieval thinkers advocate the efficacy of law, temporal or eco-celestial. The contractualist did refer to the natural law. The jurist from the Austin to Blackstone and Koch never lost sight of the juridical and legal power. The Marxists denounce the state as an instrument of exploitation, while the anarchists reject externally imposed authority. No modern political philosopher, if any, should preach a system without making rule of law as the foundation of the society. Now let us move to the next section, that is Western political thought, political idealism, and political realism. The two major streams along with which the whole Western political thought keeps marching on are political idealism, or as one may see, political philosophy, The second is political realism, or as one may call it, political science. Plato represents political idealism and is rightly described as the father of the political philosophy. Aristotle represents political realism and is very aptly called the father of political philosophy. Philosophy and science have dominated the course of the Western political thought. For a long time in the history of the West, philosophy ruled political thought till about the first half of the 19th century. It was then that science, owing largely to the development made in other social sciences and the urge to make political phenomena relevant, captured the attention of the political philosophers, especially during the early years of the decades of 1950s and 1960s in United States. Then came an era of debates between the normative political philosophy and the empirical one, the traditionalist and the behavioralist, the debate whether political theory is dead or alive. These debates characterized nothing but the tussle between the philosophy and science, between idealism and realism. All these testified nothing but change and continuity in the Western tradition. Berlin, in an article in Gould and Tolstoy, contemporary political thought, writes neo Marxism, neo theomism, nationalism, historicism, existentialism, anti essential liberalism, and socialism, transposing of doctrines of natural rights and natural law into empirical terms, indicates not the death of a great tradition, but, if anything, new and unpredictable developments. All political thoughts, as it has developed or evolved, has tossed between what it ought to be and what is, and constantly moves between the two levels. Here we want to wind up today's lecture. Thank you so much for your attention.